On June 13, 1981, in Paris, a couple witnesses a small Asian man exiting a taxi with two large, heavy bags. The man attempts to hide the bags under bushes near a lake when he notices the couple watching. Curious, the couple moves closer to investigate the concealed bags. Once they open the first bag, they are in for a shock. Inside is the bloody, mutilated torso of a woman. This is the story of Issei Sagawa, the man who ate a woman and got away with it. From the outside looking in, Issei Sagawa appeared to be a man of opportunity and intellect. Born on April 26, 1949, in the affluent city of Kobe, Hyogo Prefecture, Japan, Sagawa was the offspring of considerable wealth and influence. His father, a prominent businessman, and his grandfather, an esteemed editor. However, Sagawa's premature birth and subsequent health complications seemed to cast a shadow over his life, one that darkened with each passing year. Despite overcoming his early health struggles, Sagawa developed into a man fixated on the grotesque. In the innocent setting of a classroom, while his peers were oblivious to his inner turmoil, young Sagawa was silently nurturing a cannibalistic desire that was sparked by the mere sight of a classmate's thigh. This fixation followed him into adulthood, transforming from a silent specter into a violent reality. The first time he attempted to bring his fantasy to life was when he was a 24-year-old student at Waco University in Tokyo. There was a blonde German woman who lived nearby, and Sagawa became obsessed with her, stalking her until he found out where she lived. Then, one night, he broke into her apartment with the plan of hitting her over the head to knock her out. He believed he could then eat some of her flesh without killing her. However, as he was breaking in, he awakened the woman, who immediately began screaming. The police came right away and arrested Sagawa for attempted rape. Sagawa did not tell them his real intentions. This incident, brushed under the rug with a monetary settlement by his father, was a prelude to the horror that would later unfold in Paris. Sagawa's relocation to France, under the guise of furthering his education, was a mere cover for his sinister aspirations. The Sorbonne became his hunting ground, where he preyed upon the unsuspecting female students. Surrounded by so many beautiful young women, his cannibalistic urges grew harder to resist. While in Paris, he says that he had tried to kill several prostitutes in order to eat them, but simply couldn't pull the trigger. Renee Hartveld was a 25-year-old Dutch woman who met Issei during their studies in Paris. Seemingly developing some rapport with one another, Sagawa felt comfortable enough to invite her to dinner at his apartment to translate poetry for a school assignment, and Renee obliged. However, little did she know that Issei had different plans. As much as he wanted to consume Hartveld, he says, he didn't want to have to kill her. She had actually been a good friend to him, perhaps the only friend he had ever had. But his compulsion was too strong to resist. It didn't take long after Renee arrived that Sagawa killed her. Sagawa shot her in the back of the neck with a rifle. Because of the shock of the shot, he fainted, but once regaining consciousness, Sagawa resumed committing necrophilia with her corpse. He tried biting into her flesh, but could not, so he purchased a butcher knife to continue cutting her up, cooking parts of her body and eating them both raw and cooked. This must sound rich coming from me, but the moment the girl became a corpse, I realized that I had lost an important friend and even regretted killing her for a moment. What I truly wished was to eat her living flesh. Nobody believes me.
買ってきてその中に入れるんですけど、そんなに簡単に入るもんじゃない。特に胴体っていうのはものすごく重いし、まず切るのも大変でした。
But my ultimate intention was to eat her, not necessarily kill her, Sagawa later said in an interview. After consuming various parts of her and taking photos of her corpse, Sagawa dismembered her body and placed them into two separate suitcases. This is when he left for the lake, where he was soon caught. The couple who had seen Sagawa called the police after opening the first suitcase, but Sagawa had vanished before police arrived. Police found out that one bag contained her torso and that Renee's head and limbs were in the other bag. Clearly, the then unknown tiny Asian man was trying to dump the evidence of his crime in the lake and panicked when he saw he was being watched. The victim's remains were taken in for an autopsy. Once on the table, her body told the story of a grisly crime. The woman had suffered a gunshot wound to her neck, which was the cause of her death. But that wasn't all. Her body was mutilated extensively, with large pieces of her legs, breasts, and buttocks cut away. An exam would reveal that someone had had sex with her corpse over the course of about 2 days. Police traced the taxi driver who had transported a man from a luxury apartment on Rue Erlanger in Paris's affluent Auteuil district. The driver recounted jokingly, questioning if the heavy bags he loaded contained a body, to which the man replied they were books. Investigation into the apartment's residence revealed a single Asian man fitting the witness description, 32-year-old Issei Sagawa, a Japanese literature student at the Sorbonne. Only 48 hours after his botched attempt to dump the body, Sagawa was arrested at his apartment. On his table, police found a partially eaten meal of vegetables and human flesh. Inside his refrigerator, they found more pieces of human flesh, carefully wrapped so as to be eaten later. Under questioning, Sagawa confessed readily. The victim's name, he told police, is Renee Hartveld, a Dutch classmate of his at the Sorbonne. He had been attracted to her for some time, he told them, and he would get aroused just thinking about eating her flesh, especially her buttocks. He killed her, he confessed, solely in order to eat her. He told police that he had attempted to kill her a few times before, but had chickened out at the last minute. This time, he had steeled himself, vowing to follow through with his twisted plan. Knowing Hartveld was fluent in German, he invited her over to his apartment by asking her to read a German poem about cannibalism so that he could record it for a class. Sagawa said that while she was reading the poem, with her back turned to him, he aimed his .22 rifle at her neck and pulled the trigger. There was no doubt that Sagawa was guilty of murdering Hartveld. However, because the French would not try a person who is ruled insane, Sagawa was sent for a pre-trial psychiatric exam. His exam revealed a twisted pathology going back decades. Sagawa told the court psychiatrist that he first began to fantasize about cannibalizing women around the age of 11. When he was attracted to a woman, always tall, blonde white women, he would also get hungry for the taste of her flesh, particularly her thighs. He said this urge to eat the object of his desire was the ultimate expression of love, of wanting to consume them and make them a part of him. As time went on, the compulsion just seemed to grow within him. He explained that he never wanted to kill anyone, only to eat them. After their exams, the French court psychiatrist concluded that Sagawa was indeed insane, a sexual psychopath, and therefore unfit to stand trial. He was sent to an asylum for the criminally insane, where he was to be confined indefinitely. Sagawa did not take his sentence well. As a well-educated man from a wealthy family, he felt he did not belong with the other patients who were, as he put it, deranged, and would have preferred prison to the insane asylum. But he made good use of his time, writing and illustrating a semi-autobiographical book as a form of therapy. Thanks to the infamy he gained because of his gruesome crime, he was approached by an author from Japan named Inihiko Yamota. Yamota convinced Sagawa to let him publish a copy of Sagawa's own book. The book, which included graphic details of the murder and cannibalizing of Hartveld, became a bestseller in Japan, and Sagawa's infamy transformed into fame. Then, in 1984, Sagawa's father came to his rescue and provided his son with an influential attorney to ensure his return to Japan, capitalizing on the French public's unhappiness with having to support a criminal like Sagawa. The attorney convinced the French government to deport him back to Japan. Sagawa arrived in a media frenzy. However, he could grant no interviews yet. He was immediately taken by ambulance to Matsuzawa Hospital. What the French government and the public at large didn't know was that Sagawa was only admitted to Matsuzawa Hospital voluntarily. The ambulance and appearance of being taken into custody was little more than a press stunt designed to cover for the fact that Sagawa was now a free man. Because he had been declared insane, the charges against him in France were sealed, so none of the paperwork could be released to Japanese authorities. Without the French case files, Japan had nothing to charge him with. After 15 months at Matsuzawa, Sagawa, a confessed murderer, cannibal, and necrophile, checked himself out and walked free. After his release, the Japanese media treated Sagawa as a kind of eccentric celebrity. He was interviewed on numerous TV shows and magazines, where he spoke calmly about his crimes, describing in detail how he killed and cannibalized Hartveld. He has been a guest commentator on TV shows, has appeared on game shows and cooking shows, and even worked as a freelance food critic. He has also starred in several adult films where he bites his co-stars. For a time, he was able to support himself with the royalties and fees for media appearances, along with a hefty inheritance after his parents died. However, once his inheritance and public interest dried up, he was forced to live in public housing and draw welfare benefits. By 2013, his health was failing. He was diagnosed with diabetes and suffered 2 heart attacks. He died of pneumonia in 2022, and his funeral was attended only by his family. In what is perhaps a small bit of poetic justice, shortly before his death, Segawa had to undergo a gastronomy and could only eat through a feeding tube.